Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to day 2 of the Warriors Corner. Presenting next, we have Army Futures Command, transforming command and control warfighting systems.
Awesome. How's everybody doing? I thought I was talking to myself. All right. So transforming the C2 systems, the warfighting systems. So what you're going to hear today, and the takeaway is going to be twofold. One, how aligned we are with this team that's going to present to you today. And number two, reimagining how we look at our C2 systems. My name is Major General Ray, and I'm the Network Cross-Functional Team Director. I'm stationed at Aberdeen Proving Ground. I've been in the seat for about 2 years. And I just want to take a few minutes to talk to you about what the team will come up and present ahead of everything else that takes place today. So we're aligning our messaging. We're aligning our processes. We're aligning our funding, and you can hear it across the entire AUSA since we've been here when it comes to our communication systems. This team is synced together. We work endlessly together to get the network right. You're also going to hear about the 3 things that we're reimagining when it comes to the network. Number 1, we're reimagining communications on the move. No longer are we looking at building out CPs that are static. We need our CPs to be, our command posts to be on the move. We want it to be light, agile, and we want it to be able to move. Number 2, we're going to reimagine our signature management. The electromagnetic spectrum has to be reimagined. We have to hide our signals in plain sight. We have to ensure that the commander can see themselves so they can make informed decisions along the way on how they look in the electromagnetic spectrum. And lastly, we have to reimagine how we share information with our partners. We can no longer have episodic networks from a mission partner environment that we build up and pull down. We have to have a persistent connection to our networks when it comes to sharing with our partners across the board. So those are the 3 focus areas that we're looking at across the board. You heard our chief just spoke a little bit ago, and he talked about the network being the priority across the board. He talked about commanders need to really see what they look like in the signature environment, in the electromagnetic spectrum. And he talked about having more intuitive capabilities when it comes to command and control systems. So you'll hear from the team as we walk through our unified network right into the things that we're talking about from a warfighter perspective. So the next person that's coming to the stage is General Brown, and she'll talk to you about the unified network.
All right. Thanks, sir. I appreciate it. So for those who may not know me, I am Brigadier General Denise Brown. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. and I am the director for Networks, Command, Control, Communications, Services, and Integration, also known as NC4SI, used to be AONS in the HQDA G6. So I just took up like 30 seconds, like just describing my job title. So General Ray was talking about, we are transforming and reimagining how we do C2. And what is key to that, what underpins all that, is the backbone of the unified network. And the unified network is going to be that capability that delivers the resilient and secure communications to ensure that we have access, secure access to our information. And it's a game changer. We are executing now, and we are accelerating. The centralized delivery of services. So when you think about how we do the networks in the past, we had about 49 organizational networks. We're starting to converge those networks. We're down to about 13. And then we're moving to centralized delivery of services by a single service provider, or cyber. And why is that important? It's important because we're going to remove that complexity away from the commands. Let those commands do only what they can do. Let them focus on the warfighting, let them focus on logistics, and let our cyber focus on delivering secure communications. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to start moving towards the delivering, you'll have the network that's going to be accessible from the enterprise to the tactical edge. So we're going to remove that enterprise and tactical, and it's one network, that unified network. The other thing we're doing is we have established, when you start talking about material delivery, and Mark Kitts will come up here later and talk about what they're doing with a single PEO. We are unifying our governance. You've heard about making sure we're using our resources the best way we can. So part of the unifying our governance is synchronizing our requirements, making sure we don't have duplication, and aligning those resources to it. And so we're making the most efficient and effective use of our resources to deliver these capabilities to the warfighter. So I'm not going to take up much more time. I'm going to hand it over to Mark Kitts, who's going to talk about the kit, no pun intended, the material that's going to deliver that. And he also has the best shoes, the most comfortable shoes in this room today.
You said no jokes. You told me I wasn't allowed to tell jokes.
Totally true.
All right, fine. How's everybody doing today? Doing all right? Excited about our network? Who's excited about our network? Come on. Yeah, let's go. Let's do it. So Mark Kitts, I am the PEO for C3T, formerly the PEO of Intelligence, Electronic Warfare, and Sensors. So I've been the PEO for the network for about 9 weeks. And I'm excited about network modernization. I'm excited about the future of our network, and I'm excited about defining our network for the future fight. And that's what I wanted to start talking about is, how do we define the network for our future fight? Could anyone have done that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, what our network would look like today? That's a fool's errand to try to define what it should look like in 5 years. So what I'm going to talk about is challenging industry and government partnership to build iterative programs so that we can get after the future of our network together, so that we can embrace innovation, that we can embrace a flexible future network that we can modernize over time, because there is no end state for our network. There is no end state for our mission command applications. So we together, industry and government, need to partner to build more iterative and agile programs. Another area we need to partner on, and General Ray talked about this, how is our portfolio being invested in? When you look at the network as a portfolio, how is our network properly aligned in terms of investments? You have insight in that as industry. We have insight as that as government. How do we see ourselves in terms of our portfolio? Are we taking advantage of opportunities? I think this is a big part of our partnership to get after the future network. The third thing I want to talk about is there is no one-size-fits-all approach for our network. Whether it's SATCOM, radios, applications, enterprise technologies, unified network operations, there is no one contract, there is no one capability, there is no one application. So we can't have a philosophy that we're going to have these one-size-fits-all approach. And I, in my early here 9 weeks, have embarked upon contracting. How are we building agile and nimble contracts to allow us to have a future flexible network? That's really important to me. The last thing I want to talk about is our data centricity. PEO C3T exists. We are delivering a network to move data. We are here to move data, voice, data, you name it, but we are here to move data on the battlefield. That's really important. That means we need to have a data-centric, data-first mindset, whether that's cloud, whether that's how we integrate data across disparate warfighting functions. All of that needs to underpin everything we do when we think about data. And I can throw a lot of buzzwords at you, but I am telling you, when we build our applications and we build our network, we need to think about how we're moving that data. The very last thing I'm going to talk about is they maybe the PEO about 9 weeks ago, and as part of this, they added the enterprise network to this PEO. So now we are not just the tactical providers of the network at C3T. We are also the enterprise capability deliveries for the Army. So now we have one material developer delivering the entire network for the Army. ICAM, installation enterprise, cloud, all now are integrated into the tactical and enterprise solution for one material provider. I think there's a lot of powerful synergies that would come from that. I'm going to use this opportunity to hand it over to Dr. Miller. I look forward to your questions at the end here. I'd love to talk about UNO. I'd love to talk about any of our future programs for Next Gen Tactical Terminal, for our future command post program. I'd love to talk to any of you about that. But Dr. Miller, please come and take this away.
Thank you. Okay, can everybody hear me? So I'm going to step up here because the alternative is I trip and I fall on here. I'm Alex Miller. I have the honor and the opportunity to be the Chief of Staff of the Army's Chief Technical Advisor, Science and Technology Advisor, Chief Technology Officer, pick your term. My focus is everything within the Army's portfolio that is science and or technology, and my primary focus is the network because we don't just have a network, and I'll admit this in public in front of a bunch of Signal people, the network generally works. It doesn't always work the way we want it to. But because we're at a convention, I will say every buzzword, okay? So data mesh, data fabric, data quilt, network-centric, autonomy, autonomous, AI, MLs, upskilling. Anybody got bingo? Okay. Here is what I really want everyone to take away. It doesn't matter how much technology you throw at the problem. It doesn't matter how cool it is. The number one thing for everyone wearing a uniform is it has to work. Not in the lab, not at your company. It has to work, which means it has to work across the range of missions that the Army has to execute, and that is everything. When when someone dials 911 around the room, it doesn't ring in an Air Force base, it rings at an Army post, and we go. So, the one thing that General George has asked me to focus on is network and mission command modernization. I will tell you that over the last year, I started working this job in January. I've had an opportunity to go to NTC, multiple CTCs, watch exercises that have been run by 18th Airborne Corps, 3rd Armored Corps, 1st Corps, and 5th Corps. We spent a lot of time in Europe this summer, and my boss just had an opportunity to do my dream job. My dream trip around Asia while I was at Fort Leavenworth as we were talking about, hey, what does the future of the network really mean? And I want to give you some observations, just what I've seen here, that are really interesting. One, most of the stuff that we buy, you wouldn't buy for you. Right? It's very complex. You wouldn't take it home, you wouldn't put it into your car, but we're perfectly okay painting something green and saying it's tactical. Okay, we got to get to more simple. So when the chief talks about simple, he really means it. And I'll give you a use case on that. Has anybody been, any Midwesterners here? I'm a Boilermaker. Midwesterners get really cold, right? So what do you put on when it gets really cold? Put on gloves. So most of our stuff is glove ready. What do you put on when it gets really, really cold? Mittens. You know what doesn't work well with buttons? Mittens. So when the 11th Airborne says, hey, we actually need a tactical radio that survives in -30, and I need to be able to operate it, the standard off-the-shelf stuff isn't it. I'll give you another example. As we're thinking it through what the network has to do, it's mission command. We fight the network as a weapons platform. And we have to be able to move those data, but we don't have to move all of those data. And this is blasphemy for some people because they say, I want all the data all the time. No, they don't. What they really mean is for so long, they didn't have the right data that they kept saying more, I need more, and more became all. So what we're really focused on is how do I make sure that for whatever mission you are trying to execute, for whatever part of the world you're in, and whatever your job is, you have access to the right data. And if you need something more, it's also accessible. But we aren't giving you all 30,000 intel reports that we generated in the last 8 hours. We aren't giving you all 10,000 log stats from every telemetry and kinematic sensor on every vehicle. We aren't bogging you down with the entire core's worth of information if you're a battery commander. How do we do that? And then how do we do it in such a way that I'm not giving you a 400-pound server stack, when really what you need is probably a really beefy laptop or probably just a tablet. Because I hate to tell you, right now, I could go anywhere in the world and I can buy a supercomputer that's got 5 radios, right? 3G, 4G, 5G, SATCOM, Wi-Fi, 802.11. It's also got a near-field communications index. It's got an RFID receiver, so splashback radiation. It's got 3 processors. One's an ARM, one's a A15, and then one's a TPU. It's got a screen that's pretty bright, but I can control it. And I can talk to anyone. And it costs about an order of magnitude less than any tactical system that we buy. So as we think about what the network means, it's really about the network and what we do with it, and how we enable people with it, and how we protect soldiers with it, and how we allow them to do what we ask them to do by giving them the best kit to do it with, without making them a giant target on the battlefield, because we also tend to not care about what leaks. We don't care about a power budget. We don't care about EMS control. But now all of a sudden those are really important, right? So the chief has those 4 priorities: intuitive, easy to use, easy to update, signature management. That's what we're talking about. So I think I'm going to turn it over to my battle buddy here, Joe Welch, to talk about the future, what we're doing in the C5. But thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Alex. So as Alex said, I'm Joe Welch. I'm the director of the C5 ISR Center. So you heard from Mark Kitts already. He's running the acquisition in this space. So I run the science and technology portfolio within C5 ISR. And I wanted to share a little bit about the philosophy of operating in that context. So to me, the S&T portfolio for C5 ISR to deliver what the speakers before us have talked about is really about the ability to take risk, right? I can leverage our S&T portfolio to take risk to demonstrate to the Army how we transition from the art of the possible into what's achievable. So in my portfolio, I'm not looking at long S&T programs that are going to take 3 to 5 years and then require additional technical maturation. That's just not really realistic in this space. But I can take a lot of risk because I don't have validated requirements documents. In some cases, some of the S&T work that we're doing is helping to inform requirements and concepts and demonstrate what is achievable now. So I just wanted you to understand a little bit about that philosophy. There's a lot of injections into this space that are based on commercial technology, as Alex was just talking about. And so part of our investment strategy at C5 ISR is making direct investments into those areas, not to improve upon what commercial can already provide, but to be able to adapt it minimally where needed into the tactical environment. And there's plenty of examples where that is able to be dropped in, just to the examples that Alex talked about, sometimes with minimal tweaks, minimal investment, and that's something that we do. But there's also reasons to be looking in an S&T portfolio for things that may not be immediately commercially available, right? Alex talked about the 4 priorities that our chief has in this space, one of them being low signature. So that's not generally something that's inherently commercially needed. Sometimes we talk about the characteristics of systems like 5G and the potential that they have for being more directional in a way that the energy is not going everywhere. That's really that's kind of a side benefit for what our commercial providers are looking for to increase throughput and increase their range. When it comes to low probability of intercept, low probability detection, though, that's not exactly what they're going for. And I hear an awful lot from companies that say that they have these capabilities that will reduce our signatures and keep our formation safe. And I would tell you that that's kind of a buzzword as well. There are ways to validate whether something is less detectable, and that's something that we're glad to partner with you on to represent into our requirements communities and our acquisition communities and our warfighter representatives so that we can really assess, is that true or not? If it's not true, how can we make investments in order to do that? From a signature management perspective, it's not just the electromagnetic spectrum, it's also all modalities. So we're partnered with our DevCom Soldier Center and Natick for camouflage concealment across all modalities. Again, not something that is necessarily off-the-shelf commercial, but that we have to be making investments into. I'll tell you, in some of the commercial technologies, we're not seeing rapid enough investment. So in for example, wideband RF technologies to be able to scan the entire spectrum immediately, there's some promising activity that's going on, but it's not going fast enough for what we're going to need it for. So these are areas that may have some commercial applications, have a lot more applications on our side, and that's something we'd like to partner with you about. When it comes to distributed command posts, the ability to have an immersive experience as we do in our traditional command posts, but we can't anymore because, as you've heard, they're going to be on the move and they're going to be distributed. What is the network that's going to be able to support that? And how are we ensuring that it's got that low signature? And how can we ensure that we are designing applications to be able to take advantage of that and really provide that capability? These are investments that we're making. When it comes to the staff in the first place, right, the ability of the staff to be able to react during execution, replan courses of action, integrate the experience that has come before them in warfighter simulations, but also in personal experience through AI algorithms. How do we implement that for a commander, not during planning, but during execution? These are some of the investments that we're looking at. So while we're maintaining our momentum on acquisition and getting this capability out, from the S&T perspective, we're looking just over the next hill to be able to accelerate that as quickly as possible. And when it's ready, I'm ready to transition it, right? We're not waiting. We're going to do it as quickly as we can. So I'm going to be followed by Colonel Matt Benini from Army Futures Command, who is going to talk about what we're doing in the command and control area.
Everybody, Colonel Matthew Benini. I'm the Chief Data Analytics Officer for Army Futures Command. So what I'd like to talk to you about is how Army Futures Command is helping the Army design a data-centric command and control system for the future. So in General George's comments, General Rainey's comments, Alex, Mr. Kitts, we hear words like iterative, tailorable, agile. We think the defining characteristic of this future command and control system needs to be adaptability. If I queried across this room and said, what are the AI-enabled mission command workflows of 10 years from now, we're at best going to be C+ students. So instead of ignoring that fact, let's lean into it and say, how can we design a system that allows us to respond to these demands as they emerge? Let's make it adaptable. So we think there's three characteristics there. First, we need to be responsive to the warfighter as a design principle. Second, the system needs to be built upon a foundation of secure access to shared operational data. And then lastly, we think this architecture needs to be modular in a way that it can evolve as both technology and warfighter demands inevitably do as well. So let me briefly expand on each of those. Warfighter-driven innovation. I think we are seeing this in our operational force today. We are watching as some of our forces, basically what they're doing is converting manual processes that bottleneck the amount of data we can consume and the speed with which we can conduct mission command and you see them implementing modern data fundamentals. And inevitably, what we find in each case, as a new solution is fielded, there's a new manual process farther down the workflow that becomes the new bottleneck. So true capability is delivered iteratively. And the tighter we can make that cycle rate go, the faster it is. Now, we surmise that as we get towards 2030 and beyond, we'll graduate from converting manual process. But I would argue that how we collect and create and process data to deliver battlefield effects will continue to be dynamic and will continue to need to be driven by the warfighter. So next, how do we achieve that cycle rate? It has to be built on shared common data. So to put it most simply, we need to decouple our data from our applications. We think about user-facing function in the form of applications and analytics as either writing to or consuming from the shared integrated data layer. That is the C in common operating picture, that shared data picture. And we need to endeavor to have that happen. Our data cannot be trapped in the applications and the services built by specific vendors within this system. Now, we are tightly partnered and aligned with our ASALT brethren. So the principles in the unified data reference architecture, we think are a step in the right direction, and we will implement those in our experimentation efforts as we look to refine what this system looks like in the future. Lastly, I want to talk about a modular architecture. So where we can technically separate core services, things like AI and machine learning services, data services, application services, or even audit and observability services, these things are foundational in industry in how our industry partners understand the health and state of their systems while in use, and they need to be part of what we develop. We think that environment could likely involve multiple vendors as best in breed contributing to those services. But we also acknowledge that that type of complexity might not be cost-free. So we have open questions like, what's the right amount of modularity in this architecture where we could change out core services as new best athletes emerge, but integration complexity is kept within reason? That's an important question for our experimentation campaign. Similarly, what portions of this code base need to be open? Can we make this a much more competitive environment where more innovators can contribute if we have open standards, common infrastructure, and these things are made available to cleared performers? And then lastly, what portions of the code base would need to be government purpose rights or governed by a consortium of performers? We think that we need help from industry defining exactly where those lines are drawn so we get the kind of competitive incentives we're looking for in this evolving adaptive system. So thank you very much. I'll hand back to General Ray.
So as the team comes back up, and I just want to re-hit some points here. You heard the what, you heard the how, you heard the art of the possible. You see that we're aligned in our messaging. That's the takeaway that I want you to have. And we're reimagining how we're looking at our C2 systems. So I'm going to open the floor to questions. I'm going to stop talking because I want the team to answer anything that you may have. Just throw it at us when we're ready for you. Thanks. This feels weird, but say, whoever has a question. Right back there.
Well, too close to the speaker. Hi, Colonel Retired Brian Cook, MKS2 Technologies. IBM believes that we'll see quantum advantage somewhere between the next 2 and 3 years. How does this new approach to our networks and the solution for our networks set us up for success when quantum comes our way?
Yeah, I'd be glad to take a shot at that. I mean, quantum is many things. Quantum has a lot of modalities, right? But obviously, from a cryptography perspective, it's very important because that's something that we need to get ahead, even of where advances in computing may be, because of the sensitivity of information. On a lot of other modalities like sensing, there's a lot of opportunity there that, I mean, frankly, we're making investments in right now. And the more that we can partner together, the faster we can deliver that capability. Like I said earlier, I think is very needed. Alex, did you have more?
So I think Joe hit it right on the head. The other piece is, like any new technology that requires stability to use, so quantum annealing, perfect, because it's an optimization thing, right? If we can get it down somewhere where it's actually easy to use, because right now managing crypto as an S6 is already hard enough. I don't want them to also have to manage the magic box, right? So it can't be crypto plus some other thing. And I think we'll get there. Like I'm a true believer. But it has to be, again, simple enough that it can't be cumbersome. Otherwise what happens, and we've all seen it, and we've all done it deployed, you just won't use it.
Yeah, a couple years ago I talked about boxology is not going to win the next fight. So if you're thinking about building a box and a cable to connect those boxes together, that's not the direction that we're taking it right now. Questions? Got one over here.
Can you hear me? Okay, cool. So, Alex, you mentioned that, if you've got an industry that has technology that is deployable and fits the need structure that you just gave us, you told us it has to work. What have you got in the plan to allow us to prove that it works?
No, so the question for those, it was a challenge back, right? It was, hey, what's your plan to allow us to show you that it works if you want technology that works? And it's an awesome question. This is one place where I'll give a ton of credit to three individuals that are up here. Joe Welch, Mark Kitts, and the PEO IEWNS team, which are sort of scattered around. Here's the bottom line. So we've got the Joint Systems Integration Lab at Aberdeen. We've got Project Convergence, and right now, Joe's team, Mr. Welch's team, has open BAAs that you can submit papers to right now. I have them listed out on cards to hand out to bring it. It's sort of a put your money where your mouth is in terms of showing that the technology works. That wasn't pejorative, it's just a function of, hey, we got to be able to test it out. Now, this is Alex's personal opinion. Lab testing is not testing. We have to be able to get it into a soldier's hand, and they have to be able to drop it, bang it up, use it, abuse it, and show you, yes, I would use it. Perfect for this is the enemy of good enough. Most of the stuff that we try to do, and I am a product of jitters, right? I remember the jitters wars. Perfectly engineered radio that never existed. So working is not working and doing everything, it's working. Like we all intuitively know what that means, but between Mr. Welch's lab and Mark Kitts is the C3T PEO and the IEWNS team who are working on doing this, those are your real opportunities.
Yeah, I would just add that working in a lab is not enough, but before it goes into working in a operationally realistic environment, like in a soldier's hands, there is working in an operationally relevant environment. And to Alex's point, that is, those are areas we partner with industry all the time on to get them out of the lab, get them into a representative electromagnetic environment with terrain, with other challenges, electromagnetic interference, et cetera, so that when we do move into operationally realistic in a soldier's hands, which is obviously the gold standard, right? We've already proven out all of the challenges that we can in an operationally relevant environment and gotten it out of the lab. And that we can do that through many mechanisms, not just science and technology investments, but cooperative research agreements and other types of activities. I'd be glad to speak with you about some of those. Thanks.
Yeah, I guess the last thing I will say is a lot of the restructuring of our contracts that we're doing now, UNO, Command Post, going after the next generation mission command applications, it's going to be competitive prototyping. There are going to be soldiers on systems before we make final selection decisions on contracts. And so you're going to get a chance to deliver something as part of selection criteria on contracts while I'm at the PEO. That's going to happen. That's all I'd say.
Hey, Dre Abity, VMware. But I'm going to ask questions that's kind of tied more to my previous life as a former Division G6. So I've heard a lot of themes over the last year decoupling hardware from software, decoupling algorithms from software, decoupling data from applications. So at what point, and I understand all the reasons why, but at what point, to steal Matt's words, do you ensure integration complexity stays within reason? And more importantly, again, as a former Division J6, you don't push the integration burden to the warfighter receiving all of these decoupled aspects of a system of systems.
So I think that's what we're leaning into in terms of science and technology and experimentation with this effort. That we really need to stress test that so the Army makes those decisions in an informed way. Because there's certainly an optimum point, right? Like one of the characteristics we're trying to move on from is these slow-moving, not adaptive systems that we've become frustrated with. So what's the correct amount of risk to take on? How do we buy it down? Those are open questions, and we will be looking to industry to help us answer them, right? Because industry integrates across multiple partners. They have SLAs established, but there are principles that we can draw from, but we're going to have to exercise them to make that decision for the Army.
So I love this because we say it all the time, but I want to put a point on this. When we say separating data from the application, like we mean it in a tangible way. So if your system, if you as a company have some special format that is super optimal to your software, it is not optimal for an architecture that's broad and scales. And I mean scales up, scales down, scales laterally, and scales across. And I'll give you just very finite examples. If your software has to use a specific proprietary or highly optimized protocol to share database slices, or to share layers of information, or to share revisioning services, it's bad at scale. And by scale on this one, I mean down to the single individual squad that is shooting and moving and communicating. We've tried this game several times, and every single time, it's great when you have infinite comms, but it doesn't work on the edge. So like when we start talking about separating data from applications from services, it starts with actually understanding what our data needs are.
The last thing I'd say is this is not like some panacea where we're going to get to it tomorrow, right? This is a journey, right? I'd argue our waveform integration on our radios today, right? As the new guy to the network, we're already achieving a lot of what you said, right? We're integrating, non-OEM waveforms on radios. That's exactly what we want to do. We've decoupled the hardware from our waveform delivery. A lot of investment by industry and CMFF and our CMOS standard. I think that's another opportunity for us to get decoupled from the hardware in a real tangible way without sort of this panacea of some utopic situation that we're not going to get into. So, hopefully, I just wanted to make a point. It is a journey. We're not going to get there right away, right?
Hey, so the last point I would hit, going on what Mark was just talking about, when you're talking about decoupling, you also got to look at, as we move towards that data-centric environment, we're moving away from, network boundaries being our security. We're going to secure that data. The unified network, it will be based on zero trust, or built on zero trust principles. And data centricity is absolutely critical to that. And that is going to start removing that complexity and that burden away from the G6s.
One more question. Lightning round. In the back.
Mark Bustano from ANSYS. This question is for Mr. Welsh. You mentioned wideband RF. What are your top priorities on that, and what would you like to see from commercial industry as you look to ramp up those capabilities?
Yeah, we talked quantum phenomenology earlier. I mean, I think that there is just a rapid opportunity for us in this space to be able to scan simultaneously, immediately across a much wider spectrum than our current systems are capable of doing. And there are many potential applications for that. But that base capability, and there's different ways to achieve that technically. So we're very interested in spreading our bets in that area. We would like to see more approaches toward achieving that. So that we can create a competitive marketplace so that when Mark Kitts goes to build an acquisition program or strategy, either on his side or even in PEO IEWS, right, that they've got a good market to be able to select from.
All right. Hey, thanks a lot, everybody. I think we've got 30 seconds to just let you know. Appreciate everybody coming out and listening. Hopefully we've entice you to come and ask us any additional questions. The team will be still up here to answer any questions that you have, but I really appreciate your time, and thanks a lot. Take care.
Yeah, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next presentation from Southcom as an innovation test bed, will begin at 15:30.
Hey, while I still have the bully pulpit, in December, PEO C3T will host the next technical exchange meeting down in Savannah, TIM 11. So that is something you can Google. I'm just putting a shout out for my battle buddy Mark here.